Now, in the latest round of talks, the American President Joe Biden and the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu have reportedly discussed the possibility of implementing what are being dubbed as tactical pauses in the ongoing fighting in Gaza. Now, according to the White House, these tactical pauses will serve a humanitarian purpose and will potentially involve the release of hostages. Now, the White House NSE Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby, has emphasized that the United States and Israeli governments will maintain continuous communication, something that will help explore the feasibility of these temporary ceasefires. Now, both leaders have agreed to continue their discussions in the coming days. Now, John Kirby reportedly told the reporters that the White House will continue to advocate for temporary and localized pauses, as this is just the beginning of the long conversation. Now, on the other hand, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu also appeared willing to consider allowing some form of humanitarian pause amidst the ongoing bombardment of the Gaza Strip. However, in an interview after his phone call with Biden to one of the American local channels there, Netanyahu reiterated that there will be no ceasefire without the release of hostages by Hamas.
Well, there will be no ceasefire, general ceasefire in Gaza without the release of our hostages. As far as tactical little pauses, an hour here, an hour there, we've had them before. I suppose we'll check the circumstances in order to enable goods, humanitarian goods to come in, or our hostages, individual hostages to leave. But I don't think there's going to be a general ceasefire.
Now remember, some Palestinians who hold dual citizenship, that is two passports, they have been allowed to leave the Gaza Strip. A few of them have in fact managed to flee from there. And this is something that the United States has been talking about. It's also talking about the flow of trucks carrying aid and facilitating the safe evacuation of those Palestinians who have dual citizenship. And also to give us more perspective in terms of what is happening on the diplomatic front and how far things could, of course, escalate from here. We're being joined by Mr. David Dunn from Birmingham. He's a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham. Now, Professor Dunn, let me in fact begin by asking you this. The United States is involved in hectic diplomatic efforts. We have seen Anthony Blinken, the American Secretary of State, visit West Asia in the last month. But how successful do you think the Americans have been on the diplomatic front in trying to work towards a ceasefire?
Well, there's a number of ways in which you can measure this. The fact that the war has not spread beyond Israel and Gaza may well be a measure of the success of Blinken's diplomacy, of going round the various Arab states, trying to reassure them that America is doing its utmost to contain the conflict. And yet, in another way, the fact that the messages that the Americans have been stating, the need for a wider diplomacy, a two-state solution, a need for a greater humanitarian awareness of the rules of war and the way in which Israel is conducting its operations, those seems to have fallen largely on deaf ears. And it shows the limits of American power in able to constrain Israel in the way it conducts this operation, and indeed the way it conceives of its security in the region going forward. So it's a mixed picture for the American approach, I think.
And also looking at how things are unfolding at this moment in the Gaza Strip, do you think the Israelis actually have an end plan of how they would want to end these operations? One, of course, they'd want to secure the hostages, but apart from that, militarily, the Israelis claim that they have now divided the Gaza Strip into northern Gaza and southern Gaza. They've done this successfully. This is an Israeli claim. Do you think, what do you think is likely to be the end game of the Israelis in this war?
One of the interesting aspects of this conflict is there doesn't seem to be an obvious end game. Netanyahu talked about having overall security control of the area. Those words are interesting in that it doesn't talk about being reoccupying Gaza. It doesn't talk about having political control. It just talks about overall security responsibility. It's quite a vague term in many respects, and it indicates that I'm not sure that the Israeli knows what to do from here. There certainly doesn't seem to be any indication of there being a wider political initiative to deal with the Palestinian issue more broadly. And nor is it obvious, actually, that Israel could either control Gaza militarily, politically, or even actually safeguard against the return of Hamas. The way in which they have pounded the Gaza Strip means that actually they're more likely to antagonize the Palestinian population into being more anti-Israeli rather than actually rooting out Hamas. They talk about getting rid of Hamas, but essentially Hamas is also an idea, and that idea may spread as a consequence of the Israeli action. So where this conflict goes from the war phase is unclear.
Absolutely indeed. Professor Dunn, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us and getting us that perspective there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.